Willem, thank you once again for being here, and if I can turn the show over to you.
Thank you very much, Kevin. I'm going to share my screen now to do a quick presentation. So hopefully it won't be death by PowerPoint. It's just to sort of help me organize my thoughts more than anything else. And I suppose just given the format, it'll make sense if you give me a chance to go through it all, and then more than happy to answer questions, obviously, once I've done. I suppose that's the real purpose of the session. So Kevin, can I maybe just confirm you guys are seeing my screen?
That's right, we can see your screen.
100%, thank you. So I thought we could couch this preso in terms of a weather forecast, given our business's name, Rain. I'm here in Stellenbosch. I presume a few of you are in Cape Town, and it's certainly raining outside. And it was a bit difficult for me to decide whether or not if I've got good news to show, rain or sunshine. But I eventually decided maybe it's best if there's a little sun next to the point I'm making, that's probably good news. But when you start to see clouds moving in front of it, that's some of the challenges we face in our business. So let's immediately get going with the real stuff. Rain is actually doing pretty well. We've made significant progress on our 4G site rollout. We hope to have achieved 5,000 sites by the end of November. And we're happy to report that we achieved that already in February. And as we speak today, Rain's got over 5,500 4G sites live. That's really a significant network, quite a bit bigger than Telkom or Cell C. Obviously not nearly as large as the Vodacom and the MTNs, but it's certainly now a very significant metro-focused 4G network. Also happy to report that our roaming agreement with Vodacom is doing really well. Our large wholesale partner and customer there is very happy with the service that we are providing to them. And just to refresh everybody's memory, Rain does not roam on Vodacom's network. We have the Rain network, which some parts of it has been constructed in cooperation with Vodacom, but it's a network that we control, and Vodacom roams on our network. And we essentially act as a bit of a performance layer for Vodacom. So our main customer is happy with the service that we're providing. Now, just to recap in a few simple sentences what Rain's strategy is pertaining to our own direct business. And in the 4G area, our strategy is a niche one. So the products we provide is data only. We don't offer voice services. So if you put a Rain SIM in your cell phone, you will not be able to call a landline or make a traditional voice call. Obviously, you can easily do a Microsoft Teams call or a WhatsApp call or video calls or whatever, but it's a data-only offering. And the Rain network is confined to the metro areas in South Africa. Now, you'll be surprised, even a place like Springbok and Stilbaai is covered by Rain. So, but certainly if you're going to be in the middle of the Karoo on the N1 and so on, there won't be any Rain towers there. The usage cases we see our customers use our data connections for are essentially 4G routers at home and in small businesses. We see a lot of MiFi's on our network. We see a lot of dual SIM phones where customers might use one of our competitors' offerings for voice and to be your primary SIM, but then use Rain's offering for data purposes. So for heavy data users and so on, we really think it is a compelling offering. And our target's actually quite simple. There's about 100 million SIMs in South Africa. We think over the next 5 years, we can gain about a 2% market share of that. And that's reflective of the niche strategy we're following. But we also think that we could capture a higher proportion of the revenue in the industry, given that we're targeting a 250 Rand on ARPU after 5 years. So that would be 2.5 times higher than the typical industry average. So our revenue market share probably be targets would be around 4 to 5%. So actually quite a simple business and target which we hope to achieve in due course. I decided that we'll be sharing some information about how Rain's performing. Just remember, we're not listed. We are unlisted business, and we'd like to play our cards close to our chest. But we are happy to note that our business has been performing really well, especially in the last couple of months. We now have 260,000 live SIMs on the network. Our ARPUs are in the region of 300 Rand per month per SIM. And we're seeing actually very good persistency and collection rates and so on during this time. It would be stating a bit of blinding flash of the obvious. Our business has received a significant lift during the lockdown. That's particularly because of so many people now having to work from home. So the remote working and remote learning demand has certainly dramatically increased. And sorry. Okay. And Rain is we've really hung our hats on offering unlimited products in one form or another. And those unlimited products really resonated during these times with consumers. I mean, the reality is not many consumers out there have access to fast fiber or fast broadband connections at home. South Africans typically depend on mobile data networks. And if you're sitting working at home, starting to burn your data bundle, it can get very, very expensive. Whereas Rain's unlimited offering really plays towards home working, doing lots of video calls, and making extensive use of the network. Rain's only distribution channel at this point in time is online. You can buy Rain SIM directly from us or over Takealot. You can go and pick up one at quite a few Click stores and so on as well. But if you join Rain, you have to join online, and quite a significant proportion of our clients actually also go through the RECA process online. So that wasn't, of course, in a lockdown situation, that really played towards our strength. We were just fortunate that obviously it wasn't planned that way. It's really for running a low cost base that we've only stuck to online distribution. But certainly during these times, it has given our business a significant lift. Our network performance, which is obviously very important, has been really solid. The network has held up remarkably well, given the surge in new clients we've put on, together with the data usage per client also increased quite a bit. The average throughput on our 4G network, download throughput, dropped from about 15 megabits a second, 15 to 13. So it's actually been very small, really. So the network has performed really well. You'll see just in the slide, interesting, we have experienced in some cases, have seen some congestion. And the reason for that is simply, if you look at this graph, the blue circles are where we've seen increased usage, and the red circles is where you see decreased usage. And what's happened in the big cities, particularly Cape Town, Pretoria, Joburg, as people moved out of the city centers to homes. It's actually quite logical. And mobile networks are typically very busy in the city centers, and that's where most of the capacity sits. So it has been a bit of a challenge, but given that our network has expanded so much, we still very happy with the 4G network's performance. Certainly a bit of a dark cloud with drops of rain during this period is that our service, and I think I'm actually being quite polite here. I'm not allowed to use any dirty words on a team session, but our service has been poor. It's been below par to customers over this time. You know, we obviously didn't expect the quite significant lift in volumes, and during the whole lockdown, we were still able to deliver SIMs and so on, but getting those SIMs delivered through couriers who are under pressure during lockdown has been a challenge. And typically also when you onboard a new client, you've got more queries than otherwise going through the recap process, etc., etc. So we would have liked to have done better there, but we've invested an enormous amount of effort and energy. We've improved our systems. We've automated a lot of our processes. We're even appointing more people to handle the volume. So, you know, Brian certainly isn't giving the customer service at this point in time that we would like, but we think that's a fixable problem, and we're focusing on doing so as quickly as we can. Our 5G strategy, slightly different to our 4G strategy. Obviously, the 5G strategy is fully built by Ryan in the major metros again. We currently have 460 sites live in Gauteng. And if we can use a sort of the fiber analogy, we're already passing over 500,000 homes, you know, in a very short space of time. And I think that's a testament to how much quicker you can roll out a mobile or a wireless network compared to, you know, trying to do the last mile using fiber. We are targeting to get to 1,700 odd sites by the end of the next calendar year, and eventually over 2,000 sites in the major metros in South Africa. Our product's very simple. At this point in time, it's simply fixed wireless access, different word for super fast internet at your home or at your small business. We have a standard offering of $6.99 and a premium offering of $9.99 per month for unlimited internet. The standard offering limits the speed to 30 megabits a second. The premium offering has no limits on it. And in fact, the fastest that we've seen a client achieve on our network was 1.3 gigabits per second. So 1,300 megabits per second, which is really pretty fast. Our offering is bundled with a 5G router, and hence really focused on home and small business consumers. Our longer term target is a bit more optimistic than on the 4G side, is to have 350,000 clients. That would translate into a higher market share, certainly than the 2% we targeting in the 4G business. And we think with an ARPU of around 450 Rand, because we do think costs will come down in the 5G environment, we can build a really good business. So in essence, you know, it's you can either buy a 5G router from Ryan or elsewhere in the future. We'll give you fast internet or home or at your business. And we also plan in due course to launch a SIM-only offering, which you can stick in a 5G MiFi or 5G dual SIM phones. You know, a number of them are being launched as we speak, and probably the next iPhone and so on will also be 5G capable. We actually think our targets and our business plan in 5G is actually quite confined. It's really limited to the consumer market, but there's significant optionality, we believe, in 5G and wholesale in the enterprise areas. We may do a wholesale deal with another telco or large other businesses. And, you know, 5G is really, if you think about its eventual implementation, it's probably more suited to a lot of enterprise applications like smart cities and drone deliveries and self-driving cars and the like. And none of that we've really built into our model. So we believe that the capital and the investment we're making, we'll get payback from just our current business plan, but it does give us significant optionality to use the network for other areas as well. You know, 5G really does have significantly more capacity than 4G and can handle significant load on the network. 5G performance up until now, we now have 25,000 SIMs live. If we look at our current number of live towers, that number of clients is already covering the OPEX. We needed about 20,000 customers to cover the OPEX of our network. Obviously not the capital payback, but it does really have great financial dynamics. So we've got 20,000 customers on the network. The network performance is excellent. Average download throughput over 250 megabits a second. But we really, some of our competitors have launched in South Africa now, but we're the only large 5G network implementation on the continent. And by implementing cutting edge technology, you do take some risks. You can sometimes be on the bleeding and not the leading edge. So we have had some issues on our 5G network over a particular time, and the configurations and so on of these things are complex. But I think our team and we've really worked closely with our partner Huawei in that regard. We've made very good progress. The network is really humming along as we sit here. And then a quick final slide on some of our financial dynamics. And unfortunately, I can't and would not like to share too much of those details. But Ryan has just reached a position where we are starting to be EBITDA positive. It's quite a lot earlier than we thought it would be, and it's obviously lifted by significantly more sales than we've originally budgeted for. We also currently in a process of raising funds. We currently just have over R1 billion facility from our bankers. We'd like to increase that a little bit, and we're also raising funds from our existing shareholders. And we just think that gives us a nice balance between debt and equity. Probably tough economic times that are coming, so if we can raise some equity, we think that makes sense. And we'll say a little bit about more that now, but it's a really positive thing for us. We're investing in equity to generate returns, not it's a really positive thing. So our capital raise of 500 million is at the current ARC valuation with a 20% discount, which we think is sort of a normal type of discount for a company with good prospects, and virtually all existing shareholders have decided to follow their rights. And the funding of facilities that we are making available are essentially for investment in our 5G network, the 5G RAN side. We've built a monster transmission network to be able to carry the type of traffic. We are implementing a consolidated 4 and 5G core to be able to do all of this, and that requires some capital investment. Up until now, our investment in advertising and distribution has been actually quite small, but we do think in future, once the situation normalizes, we are going to have to do more of that. And like I've mentioned previously, spending quite a bit of resources from an IT point of view and people point of view, etc., on improving our customer service capability. And that is in 15 minutes flat, I hope. Might be a minute or two longer. Ryan's progress and story up until now. Obviously now more than happy to take any questions.
Willem, thank you very much for that overview, and congratulations on what you've achieved in a very short space of time. On the chat, we are getting some questions that are coming in. If I can maybe start with one question, which is on Vodacom. David would like to understand some of the economics of the relationship with Vodacom, and I think tying into that is AJ saying, how does the spectrum allocation work between Rain and Vodacom with the spectrum that's been allocated to you? If you can maybe give us a couple of minutes on that.
Absolutely. So in essence, we have firstly an agreement with Vodacom that we use some of their services and their towers. Now, I'm saying it's their towers. Some of these towers would belong to Vodacom. Some of these towers would belong to ATC or Independence or whatever, but Vodacom. So we either lease from Vodacom or sublease from Vodacom. the towers, and in some instances we put our own equipment there. In other instances we also lease equipment from Vodacom, and that gives us our network of 5,500 4G sites. Similarly, we also have a roaming agreement with Vodacom where Vodacom clients can connect to the Rain network. Your phone will still say Vodacom. It's a proper or traditional roaming agreement there. And we obviously have a number of performance clauses and the like to make sure that we deliver a good roaming service to Vodacom. It's our estimate that probably about 20% out of all Vodacom's data traffic would already be flowing over the Rain network. And that is the end financial dynamics of all of this, is that Rain would make I think a relatively modest amount from this arrangement, but obviously it did give us quite a capital light way of building a significant 4G network, which we can monetize by selling to our own customer base. In terms of the spectrum allocations, maybe two comments to be made there. So Rain's got really great spectrum in the 1800 band, which most devices support. That's also where Vodacom has spectrum. And what we can do, we've offered Vodacom a service there called interoperator carrier aggregation, where our spectrum and Vodacom spectrum is aggregated. And in the modern phones, you can actually join those two spectrum bands, which would give Vodacom customers a significant speed lift. And I suppose that's part of the reason why we have the roaming agreement. We also have a good spectrum in the 2600 band. We're currently the only operator there, but that has changed with the emergency spectrum allocation, which ICASA announced during the lockdown, whereby Vodacom, MTN, Telkom, and ourselves received more temporary spectrum to be able to create additional capacity on the network. Our view is that, or not our view, the process is that spectrum needs to be returned to ICASA probably in November, December. We'll see, and then a spectrum auction will take place. So I hope that sort of answers it. If there's any more specific questions, happy to take them.
Thank you, Willem. And then David also goes on to ask just about what happens when the MNOs get spectrum in the auctions. We can presume that there will be a spectrum auction at some point in the nearer future. How does that change your business model, if at all?
Yeah, our view, it doesn't change our business model fundamentally. We've always recognized that the unallocated spectrum will be allocated to the other players, and we might also participate in that auction. Just to understand, the most valuable 4G band is the 1800 band, and that's full. There's no new additional spectrum there. And just with a massive growth in data, I mean, you could see Vodacom's growth in data was 60% year on year. There's an old adage, you can never have enough spectrum. And particularly because we're that performance layer for Vodacom, we think we really have an economically sustainable long-term agreement between ourselves. And so it's a 10-year agreement, and it really makes economic sense for both parties. And we don't think that the allocation of additional spectrum will necessarily change that. We're going to use as much spectrum as you can, and the more spectrum is available, the lower the capital cost to deliver the same amount of data. So that's just going to be good for consumers. And we've certainly factored that into our models by having moderate expectations of what future ARPUs, the revenues per user, is going to be.
If you could maybe just expand on some of that math. So you're seeking a 2 million SIMs out there. What sort of, and if you look at your current ARPUs and the amount of data that they're using, does your current spectrum allocation allow for that? And this really plays to the question from Paul. which says that, are you finding that fiber customers are switching over to be 5G users on the RAN network?
So we think there's more than sufficient capacity for us to be able to handle, say, circa 2 million customers. We would have to expand the network slightly from where it is now, and probably in some very high usage areas add additional capacity. And we can do that by either going building 5G towers, then encouraging some of our users to move over the 5G network, where we have much more spectrum than we do in 4G. But you also have an option to go and build 4G massive MIMO towers, which also creates significant capacity. Just also remember, I mean, our data usage, the average data usage for our customers are orders of magnitude larger than a typical mobile network. But we're quite open on how we achieve that. We believe we reduce the streaming quality. So if you're on our 4G network and you want to have a big TV with 4K quality streaming, the RAN product is not for you. Our unlimited products typically limit streaming to 360p or 480p, but if you want HD and better, you need to be on 5G. And we think that's a fair compromise customers are prepared to make. In these times, it's better to have a lower quality video stream, but unlimited data so you can do your work, compared to very fast data, which, you know, with a high quality video stream. So all our modeling, and we try and be conservative in that, indicates that we can fulfill our growth ambitions, getting to our 2% odd market share with the size of 4G network, which we have now. On the 5G side, sorry, what was the question? Oh, fiber users switching. I think that's a bit of an unrealistic one. If you've got a really great fiber connection, I don't think you're going to switch. We have seen some instances of it, and because there are some instances where fiber networks are unreliable, where people haven't put in proper infrastructure, and you must understand there can be a lot of breaking points from, you know, somebody putting digging up a hole and breaking your fiber strand to the ponds where all of these things connect, and it might not always be as reliable, particularly when it rains and so on. But if you have a high quality, well installed fiber network, you know, that's going to work like a charm. But even today, I mean, fiber networks are small compared to the mobile networks, and you know, even the best operators probably only connect 30 to 35% of the homes they pass. Installing fiber is expensive and complex. Somebody needs to come to your house. It takes, you know, sometimes you have to wait quite a while, and then somebody needs to come and install it, compared to, you know, just buying a router and plugging it in. So, you know, our business plan is not predicated on having many people switch from fiber. We think there's enough clients out there that, you know, will choose 5G. Having said that, you know, our offering is faster than the typical fiber connection. So you might get people to switch. However, our upload capacity is less, because your router or 5G device doesn't have the same capacity as the base station. So typically you can easily get a gigabit of download speeds, but very rarely you would see more than 100 megabits of upload speeds. But no, so the whole business plan, I don't think we're going to get the majority of our clients by switching, or from them switching from fiber.
Okay, I see that Myron has raised his hand. Myron, can you unmute and ask your question, please?
Thanks, Kevin. Hi, Willem. A quick question. The transmission network that you talked about earlier, what does that entail? Because I was under the impression you actually use the usual transmission providers for backhaul. Thanks.
Yes, the transmission part is a critical component in building a sustainable 5G network. So in short, you cannot bargain on lit fiber. You really have to build a dark fiber network. You can't pay per use or per speed because the requirements, and given today's pricing, is completely uneconomical. So we've constructed a nationwide fiber network. We mainly work with DFA, Dark Fiber Africa, where we rent fiber strands from them. So we rent a lambda, Then we put in our own equipment, and we've created massive capacity by mostly utilizing optical switches, which is almost a bit of an old way of doing it, but the new equipment is amazing. So, it's maybe just an example of, not having a legacy network. So we don't have any complexities there. We don't have to carry old IP traffic, 2G traffic, 3G traffic, and all that, and all of that complexity. So we were able to build a relatively simple network, but with a large amount of capacity, and and that is our network. So sure, we won't physically. In some instances, we've actually have blown fiber through some sleeves and so on, but mostly we ran from DFI. Kevin, you're just on mute.
I'm still getting the hang of this. There's a question around what is your target steady state net debt to EBITDA? I think if we can maybe just elaborate on that a little bit more, is in order to achieve your target penetration rates with your target capacity, how much capital will it take to build that, and how would you see that mix of capital?
Yeah, I have to tell you, I'm a bit, I suppose I should know more about that. I'm still getting the hang of all the financial ratios and dynamics in the telco industry, but I suppose I can answer it in this way. Our current plans, we think, can be serviced by the current debt and equity capacity that we're raising, and hopefully we've built in some margin there, so things don't quite go according to plan, that you still have enough capital available. Obviously, there's lots of optionality and other things that typically, might cross your path, and then you would want to get more capital to invest. What the optimal debt to EBITDA ratio and all of those things is, I suppose we'll work that out in due course. I'm sort of used to, if you make money, pay off your debt, and then you pay dividends. But obviously, this is a capital-hungry business, and you must always make sure that you have some money available. So I'm sure there'll always be a bit of debt on the balance sheet. But the way the RAN business has been constructed, we should actually generate very good returns on capital, particularly given that we haven't invested huge amounts of capital in the 4G network, given the business model.
And you're obviously keeping your corporate overhead light as well. And I think that perhaps leads into the next two questions. The first one is, can you please give us a sense of the stickiness of the existing customers on the 4G products? I think we're talking churn here. And to the second one, can you elaborate a little bit more on the poor customer service that you mentioned earlier on?
Yes, indeed. So, a bit early days to comment on the stickiness. So the stickiness up until now, we've actually been very happy with, and it's very much in line with our budgeted numbers. It remains to be seen that given the massive spike in business we've seen, how good our stickiness is going to be, especially once the lockdown is over. So, in short, that a lot of people just get their RAN SIM for this period in time, and once they go back to work, they're gonna cancel it. So time will tell. But what I can tell you, in these 3 months, we've been pleasantly surprised by better than expected stickiness and better than expected collection success rates. Just in able to collect the money. Sorry, what was the second question? Mute. Kevin, you're still on mute.
Okay, we discussed churn rates, but we can just elaborate a little bit more on the poor customer service.
Sorry, the poor customer service. Yeah, so that's obviously, maybe if you know my history, I was quite passionate about that at Outsurance, and I think the business there did really well to give good customer service in a tough industry. And so we haven't covered ourselves in glory, and it's simply because RAN, we're still a bit of a startup. when you grow at dramatic rates, the infrastructure wasn't really geared to dealing with that rates. And the majority of complaints we really see is around the delivery of the SIMs. And then secondly, because you are using it for fast internet at home, if you're not in good radio conditions, then typically you are going to see poor throughput. So a lot of people think, okay, so that Rain's the only alternative or cost-effective alternative I have. I'm sitting in my house, I stick the router, behind a big, thick brick wall, and now I'm getting poor throughput, and then that's interpreted as our networks being busy. But if you move the router to a different place in your house, or you can put it to a window, and we even now on our website have the ability that you can see where our towers are. And this is particularly relevant when you start, when you're far from the tower. And because our network's not as big as MTN and Vodacom's, that doesn't have a similar density. So the positioning of that router becomes more critical. But like I said, the performance of the network, if you're in good radio conditions, the Rain network performs really well.
Fantastic. Peter Condessa would like to ask a question. Peter, please unmute and go ahead.
Thanks, Kevin. Hi, Willem. Just wanted to find out, just as a general, but if you look at telcos globally, at a less than 5% market share, it's very difficult to be profitable at those levels. And you are clearly benefiting a lot from the Vodacom roaming agreement here. And my understanding is that for them it's cheaper if they get their own spectrum and roll out or run their own network, as opposed to sort of a roaming agreement of this nature. Is there anything that keeps them with you after, say, next 5 years or anything? Is there anything done? And if that doesn't materialize, how is Rain ever going to be a sustainable business model? Unless if you are just being very conservative on your market share targets?
No, absolutely. So I can't agree with you more. And there's many examples there. The also rans in the telco industry don't make money. Good examples in South Africa as well. If you have a small market share, you just don't have the scale to be able to compete. It requires billions to invest in these networks. Your costs are essentially fixed. And if you don't have significant market share, you typically don't survive. So Rain's got a very unique model there. Now, the thing is, we have valuable spectrum. That spectrum is regulated by ICASA. And our 1800 spectrum, which is the best 4G spectrum, we have exactly the same amount of spectrum as Vodacom has, as Telkom has. No, Telkom doesn't have 1800, as MTN has, Cell C, and Liquid. So, we think that the Vodacom arrangement, certainly for the next 10 years, and it is a 10-year arrangement, is certainly economically sustainable. Would Vodacom have preferred to have had double the amount of 1800 spectrum and build their own network? Absolutely. There's no question about that. But us having that spectrum license, we're a competitor, we've built our own business, but also allowing them or striking a deal with them to roam on that network obviously works for both parties. So it is quite a unique situation. The 5G side, I think, is a little bit different. We identified a good few years ago that the spectrum we have there is going to be used for 5G. Most pundits thought 5G is going to be about millimeter wave, and you're going to have millions of additional towers and stuff, which really isn't the case. And a good few years ago, we saw that particularly the Chinese are going a different route in terms of 5G and have now become world leaders. So that has given us a bit of a head start. Time will tell how realistic that will be when all the Vodacoms and the MTNs also launch 5G, and Telkom will certainly also do it. But I think given our unique position, we can have a relatively small market share because our overall cost base is just so much less than a traditional player. What happens in 10 years? Is Vodacom going to switch this off and so on? We obviously have significant lead times in cancelling any of these contracts. and when you do have a good customer base and income and so on, we'll see how things turn out. The 10 years is a very long time. So obviously you do want to build a business that's sustainable in the long term and will be here for the next 100 years. But we'll have good time to try and figure things out.
Thank you, Willem. We have a question here from Jason. Do you think the large number of mobile handsets will be enabled in 5G in 5 years? And I think where the question is going is that your target of 350,000 clients, is that from fixed wireless, or is that from the launch of new handsets? And if we can maybe build that into another question that's been posted on the chat here, which is, do you think that Vodacom, for example, will enable dual SIM cards and you could provide the data component of the service offering?
Yeah, so nobody knows. Well, our target of 350,000 is now sort of very neat and so on, and I can't tell you because internally we don't even know how much of that's going to be FWA and how much is going to be mobile. I do think a far more significant proportion compared to the 4G side will be fixed wireless access. South Africa probably has about 2 million higher end homes that can afford 5G. If the costs come down, it will be more. But broadband penetration at home is low in South Africa. And given the pandemic and the changes to work from home that we may see, that might be an area that grows a lot faster than the general economy. So I have little doubt that if we do see a semblance of economic growth in South Africa and just a bit of rationality going forward, that we'd have a much bigger market to address and we can achieve those numbers, and that the majority of the 350,000 customers would be FWA. I think 5G is going to come quickly, once the iPhones and so on launch. But even if you look at 4G and most pundits' projections, it's going to take a long time. I mean, even today, only about 30% of the smartphones in South Africa is 4G capable. 70% of them are 3G only. I think that's changing fast now. So I think in 5 years' time, I don't know, maybe 10 or 20% of the devices would be, of the installed base would be, certainly of new sales will be different, so will be 5G capable. Most pundits are saying the 5G ecosystem will develop quicker than 4G did. Who knows? Maybe not, but I think our targets remain relatively modest and still has very good financial dynamics.
Thank you. We have a question from Edward Pina. Edward, if you could unmute and ask your question.
Hi guys, thanks for the call. Just a quick one, Will. Is there any in Cell C or even in Telkom that looks attractive to you? Are there things that would add value to your business? Yeah.
Sorry, I think I heard the question, but maybe just repeat the first part again.
Are there assets in Cell C or in Telkom that would be valuable to you, or maybe fits in your strategy to a certain extent?
Yes, absolutely. So I think they're enormously valuable assets, particularly in Telkom. I mean, their fiber network is enormous. Access gyro is a great asset, access to towers, etc. And similarly, Cell C's got a large customer base and so forth. Would Rain try and do a transaction there? Look, we've got some really entrepreneurial people on our board and clever people who can come up with those things. But as a management team, where we are now, just we builders, it just doesn't seem to be a nice thing to go and do to try and tackle one of these guys. So, our natural preference would be to go and build a nice, clean business from the start, which we understand, which can generate good returns for our shareholders. And once we become much larger, you can also look at these types of transactions. I also just think it's going to be quite difficult, to be expensive and difficult and complex to do. It's regulatory. It also adds a huge amount of complexity to go and just carve things up and take what you like. I also think, Telkom has got really independent plans, probably not open for any deals, and Cell C and MTN and the Buffett Consortium probably have their plans in place as well. So that's not something we actively pursue. much rather get our focus on getting better service to our existing customers.
Fantastic. Thank you very much.
I see Myron has another question. Myron, please unmute and go ahead.
Thanks, Kevin. Yesterday I was listening to the ARC call, and they mentioned that the lockdown has been very good for you in terms of SIM ads. You've been able to add something like 80,000 in the last month, and it's come from businesses, enterprise customers who have brought their entire staff complement to you, right? Do you have a sense of where this is coming from? I mean, I'm taking a guess it's coming from MTN, because Vodacom, your overlords wouldn't be happy if you're stealing their customers, I presume.
No. No, look, I mean, Vodacom is a good term in Silicon Valley parlance, is a frenemy, but we compete. There's no, so we will give them a great service in terms of roaming, and we have our performance clauses there, but otherwise we fierce competitors. Look, I think both Vodacom and MTN is really more focused on the mobile, high-end mobile market. So our competitors would be more the fiber providers and Telkom. And yes, we did certainly see quite a spike in businesses approaching us, wanting to provide connectivity for their staff. So that was, but the vast majority of our sales was simply direct. People coming to our website or going to Takealot, ordering our SIM, and sticking it in a router or a MiFi or dual SIM phone. We do think it's a very good opportunity, and we do need to do some work to open up that distribution channel where it's much easier for businesses to work or to get the bulk SIMs from us, which they can give to their staff. But that was in fact not the majority of, it's actually a relatively small proportion of the new sales we made. But we think it's a big opportunity going forward.
Willem, we have a question around the spectrum. We've got two questions. I'll combine it into one. How confident are you that the IRR of building out the 4G is better than just simply renting out that spectrum to Vodacom? And if you could maybe just also give us a sense of how long you have that 1800 spectrum for, and what happens when you come to the end of that window.
So, to make it very clear, we could probably generate a very high IRR and have a very small business if we just, I mean, you've now used the term renting out our spectrum. To be quite clear, that's illegal. So that is why spectrum is allocated to different parties, and roaming is not illegal. Telkom roams on Vodacom's network, Cell C roams on MTN's network, Vodacom roams on our network. But it is, we can't simply just on-sell our spectrum to another player. That won't, that would not be regulatory robust at all, and you'd have all sorts of competition commission issues as well. So we're a competitor of Vodacom, and in our chosen market niche, and for our business model, we'll certainly compete with them as we compete with anybody else. With regards to the term of your spectrum licenses, so typically these spectrum licenses are for 20 years, and you've got two conditions. One, you need to actually use the spectrum, and you must pay your license fee. Now, certainly worldwide, governments are very loath to take spectrum away, because then nobody would invest. This thing requires billions of rands worth of investment, and if they pull the rug underneath of you, nobody would invest. But I suppose it's similar to a banking license. Will banks be nationalized? This maybe a similar principle to, how long do you have your spectrum license? But I suppose that is just an inherent risk in the telco industry. And we view that, as long as we use the spectrum, we pay our license, we would have access to that spectrum essentially for an indefinite period.
Thank you. We have one last question from Sipla Manla. We are unfortunately getting to the end of our hour. So Sipla Manla, if you go ahead and ask your question, unmute and ask, and then I think maybe Willem, if you can have closing remarks. Thank you.
Thanks, Kevin. Hi, Willem. I just wanted to ask sort of a broader question on the regulatory side. I see now no one is talking about what the Comcom or the ICASA sort of in the regulations or the regulations that they were proposing, including the WOAN and all of those things. So basically for me, the key things were if it comes to pass that something is passed that says that you now should give access to your network at a certain price that's regulated by the regulator. What is your stance on that? And what is your stance on the WOAN? If it comes through, does it then affect your plans in terms of rolling out the network? So I just want to get a bit of color on those regulatory issues that have sort of seemed to have gone underneath the rug.
Yes, those are great questions. Look, my view, almost from a, I won't say philosophical point of view and so on, but it's best for government to create a stable and robust regulatory framework and then leave it up to private enterprise to go and build the businesses. Makes a hell of a lot of sense to regulate spectrum and to ensure that there's a number of spectrum licenses so you get competition. But you also can't have 15 telcos in a country. That just doesn't make sense. Then to have a central WOAN which other people are forced to buy from and so on, I think that's a poor idea. There's one example in the world, maybe in Mexico, where it sort of worked. But as is in many, it sounds like a bit of a new ESCOM or something to me, and I've big doubts as to the sustainability of that. But who knows? I think that would almost be very difficult for even the large existing players to deal with. And there's so many issues up in the air. At what price do you need to give the WOAN access to your network, or are you going to roam on the WOAN's network? So a lot of the things I'm not sure. It's very unclear on how it will affect us. What we know is we have good spectrum assets. We've built significant networks utilizing that spectrum fully. We have made big progress in 5G, which is the new generation of technologies, which has really transformative possibilities. We've built up really great skills there. We're starting to build good products. I think the 5G fixed wireless access business model is one that's particularly suited to South Africa, given that we've got large parts of the country that hasn't been fibered up yet. And it's a really good replacement for the last mile. So, I think there is regulatory uncertainty in our industry, but our best course of action is just to keep our heads down and build as good a business as we can, build great products and give good service to clients. And it might be a bit of an oversimplification of the whole thing, but I'm not sure, how else you would craft a strategy.
Thank you, Willem. I think that brings us to the end of the session. Would you like to make a couple of closing remarks?
Kevin, not really. I think I'll just be repeating myself, but I do think Rain is really well positioned. One wouldn't have wanted to have benefited from something like the pandemic, which is obviously has a devastating impact on people's lives, and I think the economic carnage that's likely to follow is we're still going to face. But having said that, it's probably has been quite a tailwind for us. It's caused a structural move to more working from home, and I also think even a structural move towards online buying and selling and so on, which also lifts our business. And I think our products have been really well suited. So we haven't executed perfectly, but in a short space of time, I think the business has done really well and is starting to see really quite dramatic growth. And we're a small player in a very, very big industry with a very, very big profit pool. If we can eke out our share of the pie there, we think we're on a good wicket.
Wonderful. Well done to date. We look forward to following you in future, and thank you for joining our virtual summit.
Only a pleasure. Thank you very much.
Great.
Thanks to the ARC guys as well. Thank you.
Thanks to all the questions, guys.
Thank you. Cheers.
Cheers.